he probably has a couple of tricks up his sleeve with the Celestials over here, and it's a little unpredictable. I think that's one of the key things here to look out for Elf. I would bet that Elf probably prepared for Probe to play Vanguard over here, so it's going to be a little tricky for him or for her to actually deal with this early Celestial play. And it's only a best of 3, so if you are if you're on the slower side of things, figuring things out, you might just fall very quickly.
Yeah, everyone's saying, well, I really expected to see Probe play Vanguard, and am I the only one that's sitting here and thinking, no, Probe's a Celestial player. He's been playing it for the last 2 patches. I am not surprised to see him playing this. Again, that's where he's found his success in the tournaments he's played in thus far on this patch. That's what we expect. But again, you're right. Is Elf as tuned in? I don't know. I was talking to her before this event, and she was like, I didn't expect to get here. I'm just some nobody. And she had a great run. She took a map off Nina in the qualifying match of Americas, and then in the 3rd place match, she took down Prime Scout 3-2. So that's a pretty solid result, but also that's a pretty solid anti-Vanguard result. By the way, I want to talk about this Lidicore for just a second, because this build coming out of Probe is something that is new, something that B has been playing around for the last week, where you go Kree into generally Sabers. And you get this Guardian Nexus early, you start to spam Kree out on the map very quickly. It's a lot of map control on this idea that, well, Kree, they die once you got some Magmadons out or something. But in the early game, especially with their roll-up upgrade, they shred Gaunts, they give you a lot of map control. So get them early, take advantage of that timing.
We've seen an evolution of the use of the Saber recently with the buffs that they have received. Particularly you in the qualifiers use them very extensively. Now, one thing that I would highlight though with the Sabers is that they are a very slow unit. So most of the time we've seen them being successful either in late game battles, or if you rush Sabers, more in a static defensive position and just letting your opponent be the aggressor in the initial stages of the game.
Yeah, and you talk about Sabers. I have seen this build go into Sabers once. And that was on Lost Hope. Again, that's the map that has a little bit more of a choked out area, a little bit easier to defend. Generally, this goes into Scythes, which are, this a surprisingly powerful unit against a bunch of Gaunts. You're like, oh, they're flying units. There's a ton of anti-air, but because of that damage mitigation shield they have, if they can just snipe all the Gaunts down before anything happens, that's going to be great for them. But for now, this is early pressure coming out of Elf. It's a double vault opening, I'm assuming, coming out. And that means that she's going to be able to snipe maybe one of these Shadow Demons. But man, I guess the math's not there. I don't know. But it feels like she should be able to take the aggression onto this. But these Kree, right now, I guess they're just a little too scary.
It's a dicey thing. The Shadow Demon, it's still pretty much intact, and it looks like Elf is just going to pull the plug on this. The thing is that she is exclusively on Brutes right now, and of course 1 Hexen, so she's kind of slow moving around compared to those Kree.
Yeah, she is. Granted, this double vault opening is by far more efficient. You just don't have to mine as much Therium. So we see how much damage these 3 Kree will do, and she keeps dropping these effigies, looking to take the fight, and then just backing up. Now, again, she's playing from the west coast of the US. Probe is playing from Australia. This is on her server, though. So any sort of, oh, well, it's a ping disadvantage. Well, we're playing on the west coast. We're playing on whatever, LA or whatever the server is. I'm actually not sure what the west coast server. Whatever it is, we're playing on that one. So you would think that she would be unlocked a little bit to maybe, say, I got a little bit more micro potential than Probe does at the moment. But again, 3-4 Kree, they do a lot of damage. They can roll away. They're mobile. And I guess she's just content with slowing the take of the camp down and maybe slowing Probe's macro down just a little bit.
Yeah, one thing I'm looking at is that she went quick tier 2 here. She's got the Greater Shrine out there, and I'm wondering if we're going to see an early Twilight Spire. It looks like it's going to be a Hellforge for the time being alongside a Ritual Chamber, but what I was going to point out is that in Inferno versus Celestial matchups, we've seen mid-late game how good Shadow Flyers can be to just snipe out the prisms, snipe out the collection arrays, and that could be an intriguing way for her to play this, especially given that Probe isn't really aggressive in the initial stages of the game.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, you talk about the Shadow Flyers sniping prisms. Yeah, that can be a thing. But collection arrays did have their HP buffed in the most recent balance patch. So the 4 Shadow Flyers dive bombing a collection array to annihilate economy, it's not a thing anymore. Not as nearly as much of a thing anymore. Not quite as much. So yes, that's true. And also the other thing to pay attention here, like if you're going Shadow Flyers, generally it's because your opponent's gone scythes. And if your opponent has gone scythes, all your Ethereum is going into anti-scythe stuff. It's Shadow Flyers to go get on top of the scythe. It's Gaunts to go try to beat the scythes. And that is just, you don't have a lot of Ethereum left over to try to kill prisms.
It's a tricky thing, right? Because, as you said, with the buff on the collection arrays, it's a little bit more difficult to snipe. But one thing to highlight here is that Probe went very heavy on prisms here. He's got basically both of those Luminite mines fully stacked with prisms, both players on 2 bases right now.
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing to point out is we're seeing more and more in Celestial players do this, where they get their prisms far before the collection array. Notice this collection array, we are about 5.5 minutes into this game, and that the natural collection array just finished. And, you know, there's a very good reason for this, right? Collection arrays are expensive, and it takes a while to come online. You build a collection array, it takes, 60 seconds or so to go in and pop up and be done and start mining. Meanwhile, if you go and you build prisms, you get a little bit more mining, and it's a much more gradual increase in economy, which is a little bit easier to actually get access to early on. But now, as we're looking here at the Arc Station, Probe, again, just increasing the macro. Second Arc ship on the map very early. And, you know, he used to do this in the previous patch, but that was when Arc ships were very, very cheap. Now that their cost has been fixed, it was a bug that they were as cheap as they were. Still thinking it's pretty smart to go and get double Prism production, get double Morph Core production going up very quickly into this game.
A lot of info here for Elf, finding out this army to the south and the V5 rocket launcher as well. Now she basically knows that Probe is out of position with that army, but as you kind of touched on that, early sights are coming in here for Probe. Probe is playing super defensive in this game so far.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We've seen a lot of Infernal players, or excuse me, Celestial players going, and they're playing as aggressively as possible as, oh, there we go. The Rapture hits. Now, realistically, is this double V5 timing, is it going to do a lot? Not really, especially as the bottom right one was dragged into the corner by a single Fiend. Again, I don't often see this do a lot because good player's just going to split against it. But this does force the Infernal player back at home. It's a lot of resources that you get from raising these camps up high. And what in the world is this V5 doing? That is nothing.
Oh, just classic V5 things. I gotta say, V5 as a unit is a little janky for me. It really feels like it's not fitting in there, but it's funny in a way.
Yeah, it's fun, right? You know, very clearly kind of a hallmark to the V4 launcher from one of the Command & Conquer games. So, you know, we're going to make a nice reference there. But now here's the pressure, and the scan means the rocket launcher is going to know where to go. But again, initial dodge with the Gaunts, that's just still going to be a big
that's
shot.
Beautiful.
Even still, Magmadon's there. That gets cleaned up, and we get a couple of free Fiends. And, you know, Magmadon, this does have to pull away without the Stomp. Doesn't fight Kree all that well. But this also distracts, right? So there's a base going up on the north side. You have a Wraithstone here, which is doing a really nice job of slowing things down. And Eliticore, more importantly than slowing things down, it triggers all the shields all at once. It makes it very hard for sides to go in and put this harassment on. Because that 10-second cooldown, where they are untouchable before they're very touchable, it starts the moment they enter Wraithstone range. So for now, Probe around, looking for a different angle, and we talked about that Wraithstone on the third. None on the natural.
Yeah, sides are looking for targets over here, but they're banked up very heavily. And one thing I'm looking out for is that Elf is slowly building up an army, and we're getting to this death ball stage of the Infernals, where you're not just having these brutes and Gaunts, you're also having Magmadons, and that's where I feel like the Infernal army becomes very, very dangerous. You have a very powerful front line and a really good damage-dealing backline with those Gaunts.
Yeah, and actually, especially as you start to add more things like Hellborn in, things like that. But again, this big timing you're looking for is when you have the Magmadons up. The Kree they go from being very good units to being very bad units, and the Twilight Spire is here as well. So eventually, we're going to have an answer to the sides. Important to point out, by the way, Probe harassing into the natural because the shields were triggered so early, all of a sudden goes and loses, what was it, 2 or 3 sides, and that means that Elf, army, the supplies are fairly equivalent. But this army that Elf's got right now, if you can go and again trigger these shields before the sides really take the fight, this is a scary army that you can look to push with really before Probe is maybe ready.
And Probe is trying to make a pivot into Argents over here, but really these sites will be the ones that have to hold this, although some Animancers are now making an appearance. And let's not forget, you got a couple of Blast Nodes over here for Probe as well. He's definitely looking to just wait this out and play around these static defenses.
Yeah, I think the big questions we take a look at these Animancers on the way. They don't have their upgrades just yet. Retaliation Matrix is going to be done soon. Retaliation Matrix, of course, the upgrade. That means that when you're taking damage under shields as a scythe, you get +2 damage per instance. So you can do up to 20 bonus damage, increasing even more as you get close. It is the thing that makes these scythes incredibly good. But also, to get that one, you got to delay the smoke cloud ability from the Animancers. You got to delay Dark Prophecy. And all of that together means that this timing that Probe's going to have, where he's going to have a ton of AoE for the Gaunts and then scythes to clean everything else up, it's a couple minutes away. It's not going to be here just yet.
Yeah, players are very, very cautious with their armies so far. Probe is playing a defensive game. He has been doing that for essentially the entirety of this game. But you can see how Elf is also super, I guess, cautious with her army. She's been definitely holding back a lot here, but this also kind of means that she's conceding a lot of the map control to Probe. Probe really has been playing a defensive game throughout this actual game, but Probe was able to secure a lot of creep camps over here despite not having a lot of map control.
Yeah, and what I gotta also say as well, or I think it's important to point out that Elf, this is her first, I think this might just be her first competitive prize pooled event that she's ever played in. I'm not totally confident on that, but certainly I know this is true for Stormgate. She's never qualified for anything. This is the first event with money, with prize pool. You're running into this guy Probe, who has been one of the biggest names in Stormgate competitively. You know, he's making all these videos. He won the first event of the early access. You know, he is that guy. And so when you're looking at this and you're playing into someone, you're like, oh, I don't want to make a mistake here. If I make a mistake, you know, he's going to take everything. So sometimes with that mindset of, you know, giving your opponent maybe a little bit too much respect, and I'm not saying that Alpha's been making that mistake necessarily, but when you're in that situation, the mistake, you can almost give them too much respect and then give them too much room by trying to play them as kind of as respectfully as possible.
Yeah, I was gonna say that because whenever you have an advantage, if you are respecting your opponent too much, you might just fail to exploit that advantage over here. I love how this little goat is trapped in the middle of Elf's army, but, well, that's no longer the case. So yeah, I agree with you. I think one concern here for Elf is that she might have been respecting Probe a little too much, and now we're getting to the stage where Probe is very comfortable in this position. This third base he has, it has a bunch of blast nodes. He's up to, I guess, half a dozen sites or so. Has a respectable army of Archons as well, with Photo Restoration active. And I feel like this is where we could see a quick swing over here, because now I feel like Probe's army is progressively getting better, whereas Elf is kind of just retaining that status quo that there was, although we are seeing a couple of Hellborns being mixed in now, at least.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is, she says, look, Probe, you can have... Actually, I don't think she knows about this north side. Oh, no, she does. Okay, they're dead fiends there or something. But look, Probe, you can have this north side base. You can have this north side base. You can go up to 4 bases. I don't know that I can break this position all that easily. I'm not giving you a 5th. That is not allowed. So the Gaunts here, they're going to find a couple prisms. That's going to be very nice, but they're just going to get exploded by all these trees. They try to run away. Blast Node doesn't really hit all that well, but now looks like Lidicor, we're getting ready for an actual fight. We've sat here for 13 minutes. The Dark Prophecy is going to be really strong right now, but there is so much more for Elf where that came from. And the question is whether she can take the engagement, because with this army that she's built, you want to be in the open field. You want to have this big surround. You want all of your Gaunts firing. You want the Magmadons forward. You want the Hellborns back, just getting the splash damage done. And fighting through that angle right here where she was, that is a recipe for disaster. I think at the very least, if you're trying to get this siege set up, start to knock these trees down with the Magmadons. Start to open up your attack angles so it's a little bit easier for you to take the fight.
You are going to have to split this army, because we can see how Probe is stacking up on the energy. I feel like he's just waiting for the Dark Prophecy to come online. And against a clumped up army like this, which also features a lot of low HP units, the cons, that call down is immensely powerful.
That it is, but I'm also really curious to see is we see, Run By gets a couple prisms, but that's a lot of Gaunts to lose. What I'm also pretty interested in taking a look at here is our Arc Fortress is done. Right? And the big thing about an Arc Fortress, or the thing that, you know, we've seen once or twice, and actually I saw someone on, I think it was on the Discord, on the Stormgate Discord, playing around with it. You get this thing called Fate's End when you hit the Arc Fortress. It's this massive beam. I think it does about 1,500 damage over 10 seconds to structures. And it can be this really powerful sieging army. So, or the sieging structure can start to really put some pressure on. Now, is Probe going to use it for that? I have no idea. But, you know, that is available now. It's going to be pretty fun. It seems like for the moment, this is just going to be for upgrades, right? Just for continuing this power in the game. But, you know, Arc Fortress power. Maybe we see it.
Probe is getting to the stage where he can split off some of his army because he's got more than enough back at home to defend with the sights and all these sabers. So he's kind of starting to move towards the north here with these Argents. I'm wondering if he's just going to detach them and just challenge this fourth base from Alf.
Yeah, again, remember, there are a couple Wraithstones here that, again, the Wraithstone's super good against these sides, again, just triggering the shields early on. And that does make it a little hard to push into, but Elf is so far away. Bottom right side, you got Purify here to make sure that plenty of energy available going down on these sides, which means that they get a couple Wraithstones, but now Probe realizes, okay, no, the army's rotating over. There's a Flayed Dragon out, which, by the way, sides do a ton of bonus damage to the dragon, so we'll see how long this thing lands. But they're going to try to take the fight here. This dragon is extremely exposed. Dark Prophecy just looking to zone off as well as possible. And these shots, look at this. The Magmadons can't even get close. Prophecy on everything. The worst possible fight that Elf could have ever taken. Magmadons, now they're making contact, but all the anti-air is dead. And what just happened, Lidicor?
It's Dark Prophecy all over. We've been waiting for this. A large clump of slow units. That is exactly what you want to use Dark Prophecy against. And while this is happening, the fourth base of Elf is also going down here to the Argents. She tried to challenge Probe on the other side of the map. Is trying to establish a base there, but that's not going to happen either. And, you know, in a blink of an eye, this game swung extremely heavily in the favor of Probe.
Yeah, you know, it's this army that Elf had absolutely could fight the army that Probe had. Problem is, you cannot run. We talked about this a couple minutes ago. You cannot run through a choke into 3 different Dark Prophecies. You got to hit from angles. The slow on the Dark Prophecy, if it's already going. Magmadons are great against a bunch of Animancers because, you know, they go and they cancel the channels. Fantastic. If the Prophecy goes down before the Magmadons make contact, they're not getting through that choke, not at all. And with all the size that are here, they're just 100, almost 100 damage, target firing these heavy units. Elf's army evaporates. Almost no supply goes down for Probe. And, you know, her supply is still reasonable, but the bank is gone. And this supply, I mean, there are so many sabers on the map right now. We talked about maybe sabers are a more static unit, maybe not all that great. If you got like 20 of them, I think you're okay.
Especially when you support them with a dozen or so sites and Arc Fortress as well. And really, you have this long-range composition with the sites and the sabers. You cannot even get close to this if you're Elf.
Yeah, it's funny. You talk about sides being a long range, and in this context, sure, fine. But you know, they do both. They do double damage if they're on top of you too. And this is, you know, okay. So we do have a couple sabers dangling a little bit, but these positions, this sieged up position that we're seeing from Probe right now, he's realized that I'm a Celestial. I'm just going to move forward. So you take the big fight, and then you start to close the map out. Energy or power banks going down, link nodes going down, and just again these fights, these Dark Prophecies are so good. Elf, after the first fight, able to roughly recreate the supply. After this second fight, no way in hell. This was the Celestial map pick, and we can see why. Elf evaporated by so many Dark Prophecies. That's all right. So now we're in game number 2. It's Broken Crown. Probe's up 1. Elf's gonna have to try to make something happen. But as we were talking about before we got into this game, Lidicor, parting has been the dominant force of Stormgate for forever. Pretty much since the moment, as long as Stormgate has been testable, since the pre-alpha, right? He won the pre-alpha, he dominated the pre-alpha, the alpha, the beta, did very, very good. So to see Probe come out of, maybe not nowhere, because he's been very good, but to see Probe come out of the woodwork and take down Parting, and then see Parting lose to a laser in the lower bracket, and see Parting not be in the finals of the Tasteless TV event, massive, massive surprise. And that, you know, again, just gives credence to how powerful Probe is in this early games. He's going to go, and when we talk about early Celestial openings, and it's kind of interesting because I've been thinking about build orders, right? How do you write those? Probe's build, right? You go take the collection array, but that allows you to go and spend top bar energy to take 2/3 of the first camp. You know, that's how do you that's not a traditional build order in the terms of like a Blizzard RTS, but it is how you want to play at this high level.
Oh, certainly. Well, so we talked about this before we got into this game here. This is a smaller map than the one we've seen before, and at the end of the day, we need to see something from Elf here. If she's going to play passive, if she's going to play slow like she did in the first game, you feel like Probe is just going to do the exact same thing and play a very, very defensive game. But, ooh, this is interesting. This is not a normal expansion towards this natural here from Probe. Instead, he kind of goes for that third base spot to the right.
Yeah, and also, this is an Argent opening. We saw the Guardian Nexus going in game 1, Mass Kree, go into that Scythe play, get Sabers later on. But, you know, Mass Kree. This time, it's double Creation Chamber. We don't have a Guardian Nexus. It's a bunch of Argents. And I think in part, first of all, you know, this is a competitive series. You want to go and play as, you know, play multiple builds. Don't give your opponent the same look time over time. And that is often what makes the difference between a good player and a great player. We saw some players qualify, look very good, but they did the same thing over and over again. A good example of this would be Hate Me versus B. B played the same build against Hate Me 4 games in a row. Game 1, it worked out dominantly. Game 2, had a chance to win. Hate Me solved in the late game. Game 3, didn't work at all. Game 4, you know, almost worked, but didn't really work. So as you can see what's happening here, players, good players, great players start to adapt to how a game is played, adapt to how everything happens. And that's why you want to throw multiple looks. So Probe, the Kree idea is really interesting, certainly, but this a little bit more forward Creation Chamber idea, building a wall that will eventually allow Probe to go take the natural, this is a very different look, and it's going to require a different response from Elf.
And Elf, she's going super aggro here on the Brutes and actually catches all these Argents as they were trying to take the camp.
Yeah, and actually what's really cool about this, so Argents, well, you know, Brutes, they're heavy units. They're slow. Argents can kite these out for days. They do so much damage to them. So Elf, again, going with his double vault build, which is how you want to play. Now, let's be real here. It is the best macro opening for Infernals right now. You go double vault, it means you mine Therium later into the game, which means that you can go and build more imps that are mining Luminite. It means your naturals faster. It means that you can still creep out very nicely as, by the way, Elf goes and takes the speed camp, and we at least gets the money from that. Kites it away from the Argent, so Probe doesn't have a really good shot to make anything happen, but as we're going to see here, these Brutes are getting evaporated. So speed camp into runaway is likely going to be the story, but also imp, run by here coming at Elf, cuts down the wall, and this is going to be a lot of pressure on this collection array early. Yes, you can Sovereigns watch it, but even still, half damage on the collection array. It's going to be forced to lift up here, and that is all that Elf wants. That is a very happy Elf in the early game.
I love the diversion over here. She needed to make something happen after those disastrous initial battles with the Brutes. And this is a really good diversion, and there is a significant response to this from Probe. Probe has to keep all of these Argents back at home, buying quite some time here for Elf to build things up. Still, one thing that's concerning a little here for Elf is that her armies are very underwhelming right now. I'm trying to find her army, and all I see is a Hexen and 2 banked up Brutes.
Yeah, well, she's got 4 Brutes, I guess, on the map, building a couple more here. The vault will...
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, the Conclave will be done soon. But what I was going to say was, it looks like she was sending an imp over to go for a very quick third base off the natural, which, if you feel like you have map control and you think that Probe is going to play more defensively, playing greedy can be a great job. But again, this double Argent opening that we're seeing, we don't even have... we don't even have a single tech structure. No Guardian Nexus, nothing for photo restoration. This is an aggressive Probe. This is a lot of Argents on the map. This is something that Elf is going to have to be ready for. And you do need more than just Brutes. Brutes, again, they share the speed, so they're just as fast, which means you can kite away perfectly. If you're out of range, you stay out of range, right? That's the big deal. And so you do need Gaunts. You do need something to do a little bit more splash damage to be able to contest these Argents as well as possible. And for now, it is just heavy Brute pressure coming out of Elf, forcing these Argents back home. And the question, again, the big question as we take a look at things, where exactly does Probe go? Again, there's no tech structure. There's not a single lick. Oh, well, I guess he's mined 100 Therium, but not a lot of Therium on the map, and all the Therium that he has been gathered from killing off the camps.
Yeah, we've actually seen a lot of Celestial players go just super heavy into Argents and just keep massing these guys until you get a big death ball. And sure enough, when they're full of energy, they are a powerful force. You can kite them very well, and especially against a slow-moving army like the Infernals, they work exceptionally well. And once again, Elf is going to try and take this camp, but might just be robbed of it immediately by these Argents. The escalation, the army buildup is just so much more rapid, you feel like, for Probe.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I wonder how much of this is Elf making the wrong read and how much of this is, again, just how things are going to go. So the third base is on the way for Elf. So too for Probe. Again, getting that actually collection array going up fairly quickly as well. And now there's the double Star Forge. Now we have the Arc Station, which I was almost of the opinion that this was going to be just for Purify, just for the ability to go and insta-take these creep camps, right? Because Purify makes Argent's fight so much stronger. But as it stands, Star Station is done. What are we producing out of this? We don't know just yet. They're not quite done just yet on the Star Forge. But we are seeing some tech transition. Probe, again, with this build, you talked about it, has the map so much more. He's got not just half the creep camps. One of the complaints that we see in Celestial players talk about is, well, you know, at a certain point, I can't creep. The Infernal player has the map. Well, Probe has the map right now. He's got like 2/3 of the camps, and that is not nearly as nice. All right, so I don't know if we still have Ladder Core, but Elf goes.
We do.
Okay, great. We're going to have the Fiends pop on top of everything, but the Purify here is so much damage. Effigy dropped in front of things. You're going to waste some damage there? I don't know, but the Gaunts with the speed, they're just not doing enough damage here against these Argents. Some will fall now, but Probe, he's going to get most of these Argents out, should be able to escape. I don't think any of them will fall down. But all of a sudden, Probe oversteps himself just a little bit. Hellborn on the map, which do great against these Argents. But again, Probe, here's the question. What's on the way from the Star Forges?
You really feel like Probe wanted to contest this third base over here from Elf, and this could have been disastrous for her. Third base being built, Argent's intercepting that could have been terrible. So Elf kind of needed to commit a lot of these troops and take what might have been a somewhat suboptimal fight just to save this. But it looks like Probe is now making a pivot into the sites. We've seen that in the previous game as well. Whereas Elf is actually pretty quick adding an actual damage-dealing unit to the backline as well. We're seeing the appearance of Hellborns, and those will help a lot in these fights against these Argents.
Yeah, but not against the Scythes, right? That's the problem. Hellborn, they're heavy units, so Scythes do bonus damage. Then they're not fast. They are not tanky, not really. And they cost 250. They cost 250 Therium. They are expensive. So as we take a look at this army that Elf has made, this army is a great response to the mass Argent style. It is, and by the way, seeing the Skull of Shadow here just used to put pressure on this third base. But now the Scythes are going to dive in, right? And they can poke away at this Hellborn quite a lot. Again, Hellborn's very expensive. You do not want to lose it. So any damage you take is annoying. Any bit of pressure you take is going to be annoying here. And the Scythes, they can be very happy. They run back. They can get healed up. Right, again, these Blast Node shots are just raining havoc. But they can get healed up by the Arc Fort or the Arc Station. That's where we are right now. They can come again, fight again, and just by having a couple out here, it makes this pressure from Elf much more difficult.
Yeah, I love the use of the high ground here by Probe. His entire army can shoot down hills against the enemy, whereas when you look at Elf's army, a lot of these brutes are completely useless when you're just having this firefight from the lowland to this upper ridge area.
Yeah, that's a couple free Argents. Again, not the end of the world because we are seeing a transition out of Probe. I mean, maybe was that a distraction play? Scythes try to dive in on top of the Hellborn. They don't find it, but a Blast Node does impact. Looks like that actually was a bit of an attempt of distracting Elf a little bit. Says, oh yeah, look, I got 4 dangling Argents. Pay no attention to the Scythes on the right side. You didn't want those Hellborn anyway, right? No, I didn't think so. You're fine.
We are seeing a buildup of Shadow Flyers, though, and that's exactly what Elf needs against these sites. And I feel like this is a lot quicker than what we've seen from her in the previous game. In the previous game, by the time we've seen the Shadow Flyers appear, Probe was up to a dozen or so sites, so these Shadow Flyers weren't able to do much. If she continues that buildup of Shadow Flyers, this could be quite threatening here for Probe.
It can, but I really think what we need to see here coming out of Elf is to shut down this prospective 4th base. Elf has her north side base on the way. She's on 4 bases, going up to 5. But you let Probe take the extra 2 bases that are technically his. We saw what happened. You go into Mass Animancer, Saber, you have this tons of splash damage. And if you take one bad fight, the game evaporates. It can become very difficult for the Infernal player to fight into, especially now again. Remember, Elf, we're playing on Sydney, right? This is Probe's server. This is Probe's server right now, Elf's map pick. So again, you want to try to take this fight early. You don't want to let all the splash go down, especially in a setup where you maybe have a little bit less micro potential. Losing these Gaunts on the rally is a bit suboptimal. But it begs the question, Lidicor, as we see this army to continue to grow, Gaunts, Brutes, a couple Hellborn, Shadow Flyers on top. At what point is Elf comfortable taking the fight? Is it a 20 supply lead? Is it when she gets up to 5 Hellborn and starts to really do damage to the structures? Is it a Gaunt number? Is it a Shadow Flyer number? What's the go time?
I want to say it's the Hellborn count, especially because you are facing a lot of Archons here. Sure enough, you're facing a bunch of sites as well, but Shadow Flyers can keep them at bay to a certain extent. I feel like from what we've seen from Elf so far, she's been trying to just contest this this natural here from Probe with the Hellborns. And once you have a little bit more long-range firepower, that becomes a lot more legitimate. So far, she's been pretty reluctant diving the enemy base. So I feel like if she continues this way, it's gotta be the Hellborn numbers that decides when she goes.
Yeah, I almost wonder whether it makes sense to go and start putting aggressive Shroud Stones down. And I know that seems weird, and yes, sides do go and they kill Shroud Stones fairly quickly, but if you're just trying to do this hard siege, having more anti-air than just a couple Gaunts and Shadow Flyers, which, as we've seen, when Scythe's shields are popped, they don't take damage for 10 seconds. They do a lot of damage for 10 seconds. It is a significant spike that they have access to. And they can shred. I mean, a lot of these Gaunts are very low. For whatever reason,
yeah.
Elf has not gone and retaken the healing camp. So that even just trickle of half an HP per second would have these Gaunts mostly up to full. Now, that is not the case. That is painful. And we are seeing this pressure from the Hellborn, from these Shadow Flyers, again, putting pressure on the natural. But it's just asking for these sides to dive in and cause many issues. One of these Hellborns is going to go down. It's a slow unit, going to go down very, very quickly. Dark Prophecy's done. So this is maybe the time coming out of Probe. But again, that's still a lot of Hellborn, and they can target these Animancers down. One way you can shut it down, right? Magmadon stomping on top, but the other...
I love this timing. This is such a good timing here.
Oh, and yeah, we have that Shroud Stone we were talking about as well, which also not only means, right, it's this pressure that's control on the map, but also it means you can drop an upgraded one, you can manifest one, and you can turn it into a Shroud Stone as well. So knock this base down is fantastic. But now you just got to run away. This Shroud Stone, it's not going to do much. Sides are going to knock that thing down.
Supply lead is just massive here for Elf. I feel like if she wants to go, it's about time to do so. She lost a lot of white health on these Gaunts though, and that is concerning, especially when you consider that the base HP is already low and they're banked up, but you do have the Dragon Call down as well. Again, I feel like if Elf wants to go, it should be about time now.
Yeah, I think the important thing to pay attention to is that this base on the left side, so we're going to see the fight happen right now. Animancers are not here. Blast Nodes are ready, though, but we're seeing them microed into the army. But, oh, they're the Prophecy, so you got to back up, fight again. And these Hellborn need to do a good job of targeting these Animancers down, which is, again, easier said than done with how slow that backswing is. The other way you can do it is just play where the Animancers aren't. Play from a different position time and time again. Move forward with the Dragon. Get more Fiends. Get on Shrop. Purify is going to get dropped, which is, again, that's solid. It removes the Infest. But the Prophecies are there. This is so much damage on top of the Dragon. It has to be microed away, but it's going to be slow. Only 3 sides remain, but there's no anti-air. Absolutely none. It's just these Hellborn. But the Dragon's going to fall down as well. Yeah, it seems like it fell down. The sides, though, they're going to get forced back. Elf wins the fight, and the Scythe count is reset to the point where it's not a problem. More Gaunts are going to arrive, and this Hellborn numbers seems like Elf has found a solution.
She definitely did. And you really feel like the difference here is that the Dark Prophecy wasn't contesting the Hellborns. The previous game, it was a big ball of Brutes and Gaunts. They got massacred by the Dark Prophecy. We've seen that in this fight as well. We continue to see that. The Gaunts are just getting eviscerated by the Dark Prophecy. But the Hellborns are completely untouched at the backline. And now with only a couple of sites remaining, it's going to be increasingly difficult for Probe to keep the Shadow Flyers at bay. And to be fair, you still have quite a lot of Gaunts out there, so these sites are dying rather quickly.
Yeah, the one thing I am afraid of, right, if the Gaunt numbers ever slow down, if they ever stop arriving, 5 sides will kill all these Hellborn, and all of a sudden, Elf that's sitting at a 211 supply goes down by a lot. But in this case, there's far too much here. The pressure's there. Probe has to tap out, and we, Lidicor, get a game 3. Right, bottom left in this map 3 on Titan's Causeway, taking a game. Finally, in map 2, it's Elf, and in the upper right, the winner of the Tasteless TV Invitational, it's Probe. And Lidicor, we were talking about this. How does Probe react to Elf's problem solving in map number 2?
One thing that I could see working is focusing a little bit more on the sabers. That death ball of late game sabers worked really well for Probe, and they were a really nice combination in general with the sights. Now in the previous game, he decided not to go for that composition. He was heavy in the Argents and heavy on the sights. But as a consequence, especially once the sights got focused down by the Shadow Flowers and the Gaunts, and the Hellborns just completely annihilated this group of Argents, things didn't work out. So I feel like if Elf continues to go for this long-range Hellborn composition late game, I could see Sabers being, Sabers being a little bit more effective. Or potentially I could see those sights being detached by Probe and trying to do some run-bys and see if he can do some damage to the eco of Elf.
And it's kind of interesting as we take a look at Titan's Causeway as well. This is a map that's oddly good for flying units. And you might say, well, it's a short ground map. Why is that true? There's a lot of high ground to low ground to play with. There's a lot of what we can call like effective dead airspace. It's not dead airspace, but it's, you know, it's pretty close, right? You can go in with these trees. There are spots that are unpathable by ground and pathable by air. And, well, this is actually really interesting. So Elf is going to go and she's going to knock down the trees in the middle of the map early on, which generally when we see a lot of Inferno players, they play like, or Celestial players, they'll push through the center. They'll get Arc Station, they'll take the center camp, and then they'll start to really get this aggression going into the natural of the Inferno player. But Elf sends a significant portion of her mining early on, right? When you're only on 12 workers, when you're only on 10 workers, 10% of your economy to go in and not even take a base, not even meat farm rush the middle creep camp. Instead, just opening up a path for you to creep later on. But also, I guess that, yeah, this is just going to be for more aggression, running across the map, trying to contest some camps. Because again, you look at this, well, you're not going to take this camp with 4 brutes, but maybe you can deny the health camp from being taken.
And this is great. A lot of these Kree are banked up here. You do have the Hexen plus the brutes, and you know, just chopping through the middle is what allows this timing to happen.
Yeah, I don't think I've necessarily seen this variant of the build, but again, 4 brutes against a couple Kree. Kree are great against Gaunts. They're decent against Hexens. Again, the light damage is fantastic, but against a bunch of brutes, doesn't really do all that much. And look at this, Probe just playing a ring around the rosy, but importantly here, staying in the health camp, making sure that he keeps the health camp alive, which means these brutes do not fight nearly as strongly as they might otherwise do so. Kiting away, we're going to see one of the Kree go down. Second one falls. Splash damage not really going to hit, but more continue to rally, and Probe desperate to keep this camp alive. But it looks like right now, yes, Elf is going to be able to take this over. And this actually has a lot of similarities to the double rack Lancer timing, where again, you go and you put the bulky melee units in the healing camp, and that allows you to power your aggression into the main base, into the natural. Now, as we take a look at this Lidocor, the natural is actually just not taken. We're going to see there's a creation array closer to the third base. So what this means is that even if you have the brutes here, their ability to just micro back into the health camp, not quite as easy, not quite as efficient as it would have been if Probe had taken the natural immediately.
Yeah, this is getting into a scary army though for Elf. That's quite a lot of brutes. Quite some of them have white health as well. Basically, all of them are full HP, and I don't think you can stand and fight against this if you are Probe. Probe is actually just going to try to detach this army and see if he can outmaneuver his opponent. I feel like if you're Elf, you could consider diving the enemy base here at some point.
Sovereign's Watch is still really strong. I think that's the important thing is, Probe's actually starting to make this fight a little bit more interesting. Trapped around, Shadow Demon goes down, so at least gets one of those creeps. But I think you're right. I think the way you want to play this is take advantage of the mobility of the Kree. Yeah, this is a lot of... Kree don't fight brutes well at all. You get enough of them versus few enough brutes and you're fine maybe. But, you know, a bunch versus a bunch, not great. But what you can do is take advantage of how fast these Kree move. The middle of the map is open. Run into the natural. Run on top of these imps. Force the brutes back home and use that to expand. Because that is exactly, again, the brutes are slow. Kree are fast. They have that roll-up ability. Take advantage of what life gives you. It's why, okay, that's just a visual bug. This Kree is rolling. I was like, wait a minute here. We're good.
Yeah, and you can see that the moment Probe does that, Elf is struggling to keep track of all these units running around, and this is exactly, if you're Probe, you gotta do this, because let's not forget, you're playing 1 base against 2 now, and you didn't have the best of all openings, so you gotta just try and buy yourself some time, leverage that mobility, and force the Inferno player to just slow the game down by having to chase you.
True, and you know, Probe is doing a great job of that, and technically he is starting to mine out of his natural now. There is 1 prism on that Luminite mine, you know, on the north side. But he's just rolling around the map. And again, these Kree are faster than anything that Elf has. So you go, you take the Vision Camp, that's free. You're on Arc Station, so you can just raise the Therium Camp to heaven, get a little bit more Therium there, go reclaim the Healing Camp, and just play circles around the map. Take advantage of this timing that you have where you are just faster, and then buy time for the Starforges to come out. And again, I'm assuming this is going to be Scythes. I don't think this is a Saber game. I don't think the map is really good for it. But you get yourself up to Sabers, and you just you scale, right? Scale to the late game.
And given that Elf is completely on Brutes right now, even if you get a couple of sites going, they will become extremely influential in these early battles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Brutes, heavy units. Scythes bonus damage to heavy. Brutes also, you may not have
back air.
Yeah, it's like you may not be aware of this little core, but they don't shoot up. So yeah, there is that. That's also important to point out.
You're telling me they cannot throw their swords?
I think they should. You know, okay. So here's my balance suggestion for Frost Giant. Brutes should have a one-time anti-air attack, but once they do it, they cannot fight. They are disarmed. They cannot fight for the rest of the game. You split them into fiends, sure, fine, but one-time anti-air barrage, and then they don't get to do anything ever again.
We are getting a decent force of Gaunts going though, and well, as you kind of predicted, we have sites on the other side here, but things have slowed down over here. The Kree have been healed up as well, and we're slowly getting those stacks in for the Kree as well. You feel like what Probe wanted to do with this kind of roll around, just stretch out the map style approach, he was able to accomplish that. At the same time, however, Elf has been leveraging all that map control, and she's getting onto the third base.
Yeah, this is an interesting third base, right? So there are two real third bases on this map. There's this one, which is double Luminite. You can put 24 imps mining a ton of Luminite on this low ground. It's not the easiest thing to hold on to. Siege units, high ground, it is a problem. Or you can go take this third base, which also doesn't have Therium, but it's close to a double Therium camp. Double Therium mine, so you can make that happen. And, well, when we talk about how these factions play, Infernals are incredibly Therium starved as the game goes later. Gaunts, it's 25 Therium for 2, but more importantly, Magmadons, 150 Therium. Hellborn, 250 Therium. They are very expensive in this endeavor, as this is maybe a free Magmadon, but Probe's not going to click on it. So, again, taking this double Therium or double Luminite base does mean that as you pay attention to what's happening here, Elf is not going to be able to build this high-tech army that she would otherwise like to be able to build. Is looking for the run by diving on top of these imps. And this is where the Kree are scary. They blow up, they evaporate a bunch of fiends, and then as the army returns, you run away, you fight somewhere else as you slowly build your army bigger. That being said, Scythes on the rally going down is not the way you want to play this. I guess it's an F2 or a rally move. I don't know what it is, but that's a Scythe going down, and that is not something you can afford given Probe's economic state.
Yeah, Probe lost another site to the Shadow Demons before this fight began. So he's down 2 sites in these engagements. He's actually just on 2 sites, or make it 3 sites overall. Now on 2 bases, but when you look at the supply, Elf is starting to pull ahead, and we've seen this trend in the previous game as well. She was kind of trying to confine her opponent to a small portion of the map. Now she's chopping down trees to open up more space. And slowly but surely, by limiting the expansion of Probe, she was able to outscale her opponent, and this is a great opportunity to push this base.
Yeah, big problems. Well, Ascension Matrix is on this base, which it does bonus damage when it surged around friendly units, but no friendly units here. And importantly, as we're going to see the Collection Array lift up, might be able to run away. Problem is, again, this is now the upgrade, the Scythe upgrade going down. That big damage spike that you see happen is not really going to be there. Now we're going to see Kree try to dive on top. Probe feels like he needs to hold on to this position, but he needs to target the effigy down. It's so much effective healing into this army, but the Scythes, they're fighting the Gaunts. They're doing what they can. The Kree fighting on the front line, but the Scythes are just falling down. Elf, look at that. First upset of the day. Takes Probe down in the round of 16.